When you think about power in the modern world, what usually comes to mind? We're kind of conditioned to think about it in very loud, very visible terms.
Right, like a show of force.
Yeah, exactly. You picture like a rocket launch. It's fire, it's deafening noise, it's this massive, overwhelming structure that just completely dominates the skyline. And everyone points at it and says, there it is, that's power.
Because it's entirely kinetic.
Yeah.
It's undeniable, it's usually quite disruptive, and it takes up a massive amount of physical and mental space. We've basically built a culture that expects power to announce itself with a megaphone.
I mean, we really have. But then if you step into the realm of quantum physics, that roaring rocket suddenly looks incredibly clumsy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because at the quantum level, the most immense reality-altering power is completely silent. It's invisible to the naked eye.
Just a subtle shift.
Right. Just a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in state at a microscopic level. Yet that silent shift can literally rewrite the foundational physical rules of the universe.
And that is the absolute definition of a silent but foundational influence. It's the kind of power that does not need to shout, right? Because it already dictates the physical laws that everything else, including that rocket, has to follow. It operates at the root code of reality.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. I am so glad you could join us today because we are heading straight into the root code of one of the oldest continuing cultures on Earth.
Yes, we are.
Today, we are taking you on a truly expansive journey into the lives of one of the most powerful and, honestly, fascinating couples in ancient Indian texts, Sage Atri and Anasuya.
A true power couple.
Exactly. We are going to explore how this ancient power couple shaped not just mythology, but the actual social structures, the literature, and the ethical frameworks that survive and dictate the lives of millions of people right now.
So our mission today is to decode ancient riddles, explore the incredibly fierce, unyielding power of female devotion, and unpack the surprising and sometimes intensely debated origins of family lineages.
It's a lot of ground to cover.
It is. It's a journey that moves from the abstract heights of cosmic creation all the way down to the very grounded reality of ancient sociology.
And to guide you through this, we've pulled from a deeply rich stack of sources. We're looking at historical encyclopedias, ancient astrological texts, and the cultural analyses provided by the mythologist Devdutt Patnaik.
Which are fantastic, by the way.
So good. We are also going straight to the primary material, examining specific verses from the Valmiki Ramayana and cross-referencing all of this with detailed accounts of modern-day ashrams and festivals, like those documented by Prayag Samagam and Tirthayatra.
It is a phenomenal stack of information. We are basically bridging the gap between texts that were conceptualized thousands of years ago and the living, breathing practices that devotees are engaging in this very morning.
Yeah, it's wild how alive this stuff still is. So as we start, I just want you to visualize something.
Yeah.
Imagine a couple whose combined intellect and spiritual power was so immense that it actually intimidated the highest, most supreme gods of the cosmos.
Just casually intimidating the universe's creators.
Right. A couple whose sheer force of will could dictate the movements of the sun, and who established the literal blueprint for marriage, lineage, and human empathy. That is Atri and Anasuya.
So let's start with Sage Atri.
Let's do it. Our sources describe him as a Manasputra.
Yes. Sage Atri is a foundational figure in Hindu cosmology. And to understand him, we really have to look at his origin. Manasputra translates roughly to a mind-born son.
A mind-born son.
Right. He's the mind-born son of Lord Brahma, the creator deity. Furthermore, he is one of the Saptarishi, the 7 great Vedic sages of the current Vaivasvata Manvantara.
Okay, let's unpack this right here because we just dropped some heavy ancient terminology. Let's establish some context for the listener.
Sure.
First of all, a mind-born son. That is such a striking image. There's no biological conception, no physical birth process.
Not at all.
It implies that the universe's creator just had a thought so profound, so intense, that it manifested into a fully formed, conscious being.
That is precisely the implication. It completely bypasses the messy biological reality of the material world. A mind-born entity is a pure, unadulterated manifestation of a specific divine intention.
Wow.
And that context you asked for regarding the Vaivasvata Manvantara is crucial to understanding the scale we are dealing with here.
Right, because time in these texts, it's massive.
Exactly. In Hindu cosmic time, a Manvantara is an epoch. It's a vast period of time managed by a specific Manu, or progenitor of humanity. There are 14 Manvantaras in a single cosmic cycle, and we are currently living in the 7th one. the Vivasvata Manvantara.
Okay, so we are talking about astronomical scales of time, and Atri is one of the 7 foundational anchor points, the Saptarishi of our current epoch. That gives him incredible weight.
It does. And the texts get even more specific about what kind of thought or what specific intention Atri represents.
Oh.
Yeah, the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, which is one of the principal philosophical texts of Hinduism, states that each of the 7 sages symbolizes a specific sense or organ of Brahma. Sage Atri symbolizes the tongue.
The tongue. Out of all the organs to represent the creator, the eyes, the heart, the hands, Atri is the tongue.
He is.
I find that fascinating because the tongue isn't just about the sensory experience of taste. In the context of ancient humanity, it is the primary organ of speech. It's the instrument of communication.
Exactly.
So comparing Atri to the tongue of Brahma feels like saying he is the lead spokesperson or like the ultimate articulator for the creator of the universe.
That is the exact symbolic weight of that choice.
Yeah.
We have to remember that in the Vedic tradition, the spoken word is not just descriptive, it is generative.
It creates reality.
Yes. It is incredibly potent. The Vedas themselves were transmitted orally for generations before they were ever committed to a written script. The precise sound, the meter, the vibration of the chants, these are believed to hold the very fabric of reality together.
So it's not just talking.
No, by representing the tongue, Atri is not a passive communicator. He represents the active articulation of cosmic truths. His profound wisdom and knowledge of the Vedas are quite literally the voice of creation making itself known to humanity.
Man, so Atri is born from the absolute highest, most conceptual ceiling of the universe. Now let's look at his wife, Sage and Anasuya.
A very different origin story.
Yeah, she comes from a slightly different background, but one that is just as prestigious, though perhaps a bit more grounded. She is the daughter of Devahuti and Prajapati Kardama, and her brother is Sage Kapila, who actually served as her spiritual teacher.
Her lineage is incredibly important to understanding her character. A Prajapati is a progenitor deity, a lord of creatures.
So very tied to the earth.
Exactly. Prajapati Kardama is deeply tied to the physical proliferation of life on Earth. So Anasuya has this deeply rooted, earthly, ancestral lineage. She is born into the world, contrasting beautifully with Atri's direct, abstract manifestation from the divine mind.
It's a perfect balance.
But the most revealing thing about Anasuya, the thing that dictates her entire narrative arc, is her name.
Right, let's analyze that name. Because in ancient texts, names are never just arbitrary labels your parents picked because they sounded nice. They are destinies, they're precise character profile.
They absolutely are. The etymology of Anasuya is composed of 2 Sanskrit elements. You have the negative prefix ana and the root word asuya.
Okay.
Together they translate quite literally to one who is free from jealousy or envy.
Free from envy. I want to dwell on that because to a modern listener, being free from envy sounds like a nice, polite personality trait.
Right, like someone you want as a coworker.
Yeah, you might think, oh, Anasuya is a great friend. She never gets upset when someone else gets a promotion. It sounds very passive. But in the context of these ancient texts, this lack of envy is treated as an absolute world-shaking superpower.
It really is.
Why is the mere absence of a negative emotion considered so monumentally powerful?
Well, to grasp that, we have to look at the spiritual physics operating in these traditions. Specifically, we have to understand the concept of tapas.
Tapas, okay.
Now, tapas is frequently translated in English as austerity or penance or deep meditation. But the literal translation of the Sanskrit word is heat.
Heat.
Yes. It is the spiritual energy, the literal friction or power that you accumulate when you resist your base desires and focus your mind entirely on a higher reality.
Wow, so it's like a cosmic thermodynamics.
That's a great way to put it.
The friction of going against your own ego, of sitting in the forest and denying your physical impulses, generates this massive spiritual heat, this tapas.
Precisely. Now, consider the mechanics of envy. Envy is the ultimate dissipator of energy. It is a mental state where your focus is entirely outward. You're obsessing over what someone else possesses or what the universe has supposedly denied you.
You're just constantly leaking energy.
Exactly. It is a state of constant leaking discontent. If you are harboring envy, you cannot effectively accumulate tapas. The spiritual heat you generate simply escapes into the ether because you are resentful.
It's like trying to boil water in a pot that is full of holes.
Yes.
You can turn the heat up as high as you want, but you're just bleeding energy by constantly comparing yourself to others. Your spiritual container is compromised.
That is the perfect analogy. So, to be Anasuya, to be entirely devoid of envy, means your baseline state is one of supreme, unbreakable contentment.
Wow.
It means your spiritual container is perfectly sealed. Every single act of devotion, every meditation, every austerity she performs accumulates perfectly. The heat never escapes.
That makes so much sense.
Right. This is why she is capable of wielding such staggering reality-bending power later in her story. Her lack of envy allows her to hold an ocean of spiritual force without spilling a single drop.
That reframes her entirely. She isn't just nice, she is a perfectly insulated reactor core of spiritual energy. So we have these two figures coming together. Atri, the mind-born articulator of cosmic truth, and Anasuya, the perfectly sealed vessel of earthly spiritual power. And what is beautiful is that our sources emphasize how they found profound equality in their ascetic practices in the Chitrakuta forest. They are true partners.
And their partnership is deeply productive for humanity. Because Atri's role as the tongue of Brahma wasn't just a metaphorical title. He didn't just sit in the forest meditating in silence.
He got to work.
He actively used his voice to compose some of the most complex, beautiful, and sociologically important literature in human history.
Which brings us to their monumental intellectual achievements. Let's dive into the Rig Veda, specifically the contributions of Atri and his family, which brings us to the riddles of Atri and what Devdutt Patnaik calls the Rig Veda version 2.0.
Right. So the Rig Veda is divided into 10 mandalas or books.
Yeah.
The fifth mandala is entirely attributed to Sage Atri and his descendants, who are collectively known as the Atreyas.
And it's pretty expensive, right?
Yes. This specific book comprises 87 shlokas, or hymns.
87 intricate hymns. And these are directed at a huge pantheon of deities. They praise Agni, the fire god, Indra, the king of heaven, the Vasudevas, which represents the collective of all gods.
Don't forget the Maruts.
Right, the Maruts, the fierce storm deities, Mitra Varuna, who maintain cosmic order, the Asvins, the twin horsemen of the dawn, and Ushas, the dawn herself.
What sets the Atri shlokas apart from the rest of the Rig Veda, though, is their distinct structure and linguistic brilliance.
How so?
They are famous for a highly melodic quality and an incredible linguistic flexibility. The composers, Atri and his lineage, played relentlessly with the lexicon, the syntax, and the verb roots of the Sanskrit language to present deep spiritual ideas as complex riddles.
Okay, this is where I have to push back a little on our conventional understanding of holy texts.
Go for it.
When we think of scripture, we usually think of something that is trying to be as clear, accessible, and dogmatic as possible. Like, do this, don't do that, here are the 10 rules.
Right, very straightforward.
But the Atreyas are writing riddles. In fact, our sources specifically note that Shloka 5.44 is considered by modern scholars to be the single most difficult riddle in the entire Rig Veda.
It is notoriously difficult.
Why would the tongue of Brahma intentionally obfuscate the message? Why make cosmic truth a puzzle?
Well, it challenges our modern expectation of easily consumable information. In the ancient Vedic mindset, true knowledge, particularly knowledge that governed the cosmos, was not something you simply handed out to passive listeners.
It wasn't just a flyer you handed out on the street.
Exactly, it had to be earned. A riddle functions as a cognitive lock. It forces the listener's mind to work, to shift its perspective, to engage actively with the material, rather than just memorizing it.
So it's an interactive medium. You are asking the listener to imagine the Rig Veda not as this dusty, untouchable holy book sitting on an altar, but as a brilliant, ancient puzzle box. You have a language, Sanskrit, where a single verb root can have multiple layered meanings depending on the meter and the syntax. You have to twist the syntax here, flip the verb there, and suddenly the riddle clicks, unlocking a deeper understanding of human potential.
The linguistic play forces a state of heightened awareness. And if we incorporate the cultural analysis provided by Devdutt Patnaik, the context of these hymns becomes even more fascinating from a sociological perspective.
Oh, the version 2.0 concept.
Yes, Patnaik argues that the Rig Veda, in the compiled form we have today, is essentially version 2.0.
I found that theory completely absorbing. Version 2.0 implies that there is an original patch and someone came along and updated the software. What does he mean by that?
He points out that the Rig Veda was not written in one sitting. It was deliberately organized and compiled much later, predominantly by the Parata or Kuru clans, after a period of intense social tension, tribal warfare, and disunity.
Like a post-war unification project.
Exactly. And the structural evidence for this is quite compelling. The first and 10th mandalas, the bookends of the text, have exactly 191 hymns each, and linguistic studies show they were composed at a later date than the core family books like Atri's. This compilation was a massive, intentional, unifying enterprise.
So it's basically the ultimate editorial project aimed at bringing diverse groups of people together. You take all these disparate tribes and clans who have been fighting over resources, each with their own local deities and specific rituals, and you create a unified poetic and liturgical structure that everyone can agree to participate in.
Exactly. And Patanake notes a recurring metaphor in these hymns that perfectly encapsulates this. The hymns frequently describe the yagna, the central communal fire ritual, as a kind of chariot making.
Chariot making.
Right? The ritual is the chariot that bridges the physical realm of humans to the metaphysical realm of the gods. And the explicit goal of this connection, stated in the poetry, is to release what they called the wisdom cows hidden in the ignorance cave.
Releasing the wisdom cows from the ignorance cave. That is such a vivid, wonderfully earthy metaphor.
Isn't it?
It completely grounds the high-minded philosophy in the daily reality of an ancient pastoral society. Cattle were their primary source of wealth and survival.
It grounds the text immensely. Modern readers often approach the Vedas expecting them to be purely esoteric, incredibly exotic, entirely transcendental documents detailing magic spells.
Right. Floating in the clouds kind of stuff.
But Patanake emphasizes how deeply rooted in human reality these hymns actually are. They are often very simple material cries for basic human needs, for prosperity, for rain to grow crops, for social unity, and for an end to tribal hostility.
It's profoundly relatable. It's not just ancient wizards casting spells, it's farmers asking for a good harvest. It's families praying that their neighbors stop attacking them. And the poetry reflects that grounded beauty. Like, look at how they personified nature. In Shloka 5.80, the dawn, Ushas, isn't described as some terrifying cosmic force. She's described simply as a cheerful young woman waking up the world, bringing light. It is beautiful, accessible poetry meant to center a community.
If you think about the mechanism of these rituals, the why behind them, it becomes clear that chanting these hymns around a fire wasn't just blind superstition. It was the ancient equivalent of sophisticated community building and psychological centering.
Like group therapy.
In a way, yes. Imagine a fractured tribe coming together, when everyone's voices synchronize in a melodic, complex riddle chant, when everyone focuses their attention on a shared fire and a shared goal of prosperity and unity. That has a tangible, measurable psychological effect on a society. It builds cohesion out of chaos.
Man, so while Atri and his descendants were busy mastering the cosmos through linguistics, poetry, and social technology, Anasuya was mastering the cosmos in her own way.
Yes, she was.
She was doing it through sheer devotion and that perfectly sealed container of moral force we talked about earlier. And her power, generated in the quiet isolation of the Chitrakuta forest, eventually grew so immense that it attracted the attention and the extreme envy of the highest gods in the universe.
The irony, right? The gods feeling envy.
Totally. Which leads us into one of the most famous and frankly bizarre narratives in this entire mythos, the story of baking iron beans and the disguised gods.
This narrative is a masterclass in ancient theological paradox. It begins not on earth, but in the celestial realms. The Tridevi, the supreme trinity of goddesses, comprising Saraswati, the goddess of knowledge, Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth, and Parvati, the goddess of power, find themselves in a debate over who is the most virtuous, devoted woman in existence.
A completely relatable argument for supreme beings to have.
Naturally. And to settle this celestial debate, they bring in Sage Narada to act as an impartial judge. Now, Narada is a ubiquitous figure in Hindu mythology. He is a divine sage, a traveling musician, but he is also a notorious instigator.
Oh yeah, he's a troublemaker.
He is the catalyst for conflict. He loves to stir the pot just to see how the cosmic order will react.
He is the ultimate agent of chaos wrapped in the robes of a holy man. So Narada listens to the three supreme goddesses make their cases, and then he delivers his verdict.
And he doesn't hold back.
Not at all. He essentially says, listen, you are all wonderful, but the greatest, most unyieldingly virtuous woman in all of existence isn't a goddess. She is a mortal woman on earth named Anasuya. And to really drive the point home, he slyly mentions that her chastity and accumulated spiritual power are so intense that she could, quote, bake beans made of iron.
That phrase is incredible.
I am obsessed with the specificity of that metaphor, baking beans made of iron. It's an alchemical impossibility. You can't soften iron by boiling it in a clay pot. It's a task meant to highlight a level of power that completely defies the laws of physics.
And the goddesses took it literally.
Exactly. The goddesses, feeling their pride wounded, actually attempt to do this. They try to bake iron beams in the heavens, and of course they fail. And this failure unites them in a fiery, intense envy of this mortal woman, Anasuya.
And remember the thermodynamics of envy we discussed earlier. The goddesses are consumed by it, and it drives them to demand action. They go to their husbands, the Trimurti, comprising Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the preserver, and Shiva, the destroyer, and demand that they go down to earth to test Anasuya's virtue.
Basically a sting operation.
Yes, they want her exposed as a fraud to soothe their own bruised egos.
And the Trimurti, the supreme architects of reality, apparently unable to say no to their wives, agree to the sting operation. The gods disguise themselves as traveling mendicants, basically wandering ascetics begging for food and alms. They wait strategically until Sage Atri is away from the hermitage bathing in the river, leaving Anasuya alone, and they approach her door.
They approach her and immediately invoke their absolute right as guests. In this cultural framework, the concept of Atithi Devo Bhava, which translates to the guest is equivalent to God, is a supreme, unbreakable rule of hospitality.
You just can't say no.
You simply cannot deny a guest at your door. But the disguised Trimurti present her with a horrifying, calculated paradox. They claim they are undertaking a highly specific vow, and the strict condition of this vow is that she must serve them their food while completely nude.
Okay, let's really analyze the trap here because it is diabolical.
It's brilliant in a terrifying way.
If she refuses to serve them food because of their demand, she violates the sacred cosmic duty of hospitality and incurs a terrible spiritual sin, failing the test of virtue.
Right.
But if she agrees to serve them and disrobes in front of 3 strange men, she breaks her vow of absolute chastity and modesty, completely shattering the spiritual power she has built her entire life, also failing the test. It is a binary track designed with no possible exit. It's designed to crush a mortal mind.
What is deeply fascinating here is how mythology uses these impossible paradoxes to reveal the nature of true divinity. The gods assume she operates within a binary framework. But Anasuya uses lateral thinking, powered by her immense reservoir of tapas, to redefine the very parameters of reality.
She doesn't even blink.
She doesn't panic. She doesn't argue.
She just looks at the trap, steps entirely outside of it, and finds a third option. And her tool of choice is something called pada tirtham. What exactly is the mechanism of that?
Well, pada tirtham literally translates to the water that has been used to wash her husband's feet.
Okay, kind of gross to modern ears.
Right. To understand this, we have to strip away our modern sensibilities regarding hygiene. In the context of her intense devotion, this water is not just dirty bath water. It is a physical substance that has been imbued and saturated with the accumulated power of her absolute, unwavering reverence and service. It is concentrated devotional energy in liquid form.
Man. So she takes this highly charged water, mutters a mantra, and sprinkles it over the 3 disguised mendicants. And instantly, the supreme creator, preserver, and destroyer of the universe are transformed into tiny, helpless, crying human infants.
Just like that. And in a single stroke, she shatters the paradox.
Right, and amazing.
By turning them into infants, she can now safely disrobe to breastfeed them. She fulfills their exact, literal demand for food served in the nude, while simultaneously preserving her chastity completely.
Yeah.
Because a mother feeding her children is considered the purest, most virtuous, and fundamentally non-sexual act imaginable.
Loophole found.
Exactly. She outwitted the very architects of reality by altering the nature of the threat.
It is absolute genius. I cannot get over the psychological defeat of the gods here. The CEOs of the cosmos try to run a sting operation, and they get turned into toddlers. It is a spectacular backfire.
It really is.
She completely neutralizes their intimidation through an act of maternal care. Some versions of the story even describe her lovingly placing the supreme deities of the universe into a wooden cradle and rocking them to sleep.
The humiliation of the gods is complete, but it is a humbling that ultimately brings cosmic balance. Up in heaven, the Tridevi realize their husbands have been gone for far too long and begin to panic.
Where are our husbands?
Exactly. Narada, playing his part to the end, informs them of what happened. The goddesses, deeply chastened and stripped of their envy, rush down to the ashram and beg Anasuya to restore their husbands.
And here is where the free from envy part really shines. Because she is Anasuya, she doesn't gloat. She doesn't hold the universe hostage. She complies and restores the gods. And the Trimurti are actually thrilled.
They are.
They are so profoundly impressed that a mortal outsmarted them that they offer her a massive boon, anything she wants.
And her request is beautiful in its simplicity. Having experienced the maternal bond while feeding them, she asks that the Trimurti be born on Earth as her actual children. The gods agree. And so Dattatreya is born as an avatar of Vishnu, Chandra is born as a form of Brahma, and Dravasa is born as an avatar of Shiva. Though, as you noted in our sources, there is a very prominent unified version of this birth where Dattatreya is born as a single conjoined entity possessing 3 heads, 2 limbs, and 6 arms, embodying all 3 gods simultaneously.
That imagery of the 3-headed Dattatreya is iconic across India today. But the subtext of this myth is what really sticks with me. It shows how, in this specific ancient worldview, true power isn't about wielding lightning bolts or commanding vast armies. The weapon that defeated the gods was an act of humble, everyday devotion washing someone's feet. The lowest, most subservient act becomes the fulcrum that moves the universe.
It forces a reevaluation of what strength is. Anasuya's ego is so minimal, so non-existent, that her capacity to hold power becomes infinite. She's a conduit, not a barricade.
That's a great way to put it. And this incredible capacity to bend reality wasn't just used to resolve a domestic dispute with the gods, because Anasuya later used this exact same reservoir of power to literally save the solar system from a catastrophic halt.
The stakes get much higher.
Way higher. Which brings us to a massive story of colliding absolute powers. The woman who stopped the sun.
This narrative is one of the most intense ethical thought experiments in the mythology. It revolves around a deeply flawed Brahmin named Kaushika. Now, Kaushika is married to a woman named Sumati, sometimes referred to as Chandili in different texts.
Okay.
Sumati embodies that same intense pativrata, the flawless devotion to the husband that Anasuya does, but Kaushika does not deserve it. He has fallen into terrible habits. He regularly visits a prostitute, squanders his wealth, and eventually contracts leprosy. The prostitute, seeing he has nothing left to offer, throws him out into the street.
So Kaushika is a genuinely terrible guy. He abandoned his devoted wife, got sick, and got thrown out. But his wife, Sumati, operating on this principle of absolute devotion, takes him back in. She cares for his rotting body. And then shockingly, when he begs her to carry him back to the prostitute's house because he still desires her, Sumati actually agrees.
It's hard to read.
It is. She puts this man on her back and begins carrying him through a deep, dark forest at night.
It is an extreme, highly uncomfortable depiction of devotion that definitely challenges modern sensibilities, but it sets the stage for a cosmic accident. As she is carrying him through the dark forest, they stumble, and they accidentally trip over a man hidden in the darkness. But this isn't just a traveler. It is Sage Mandavya.
And we need to explain the horrifying situation Sage Mandavya is currently in. He isn't just sitting there meditating, he is impaled on a wooden spike.
Yes. Sage Mandavya had been wrongly accused of a crime, and the local king sentenced him to the standard brutal punishment of the time, impalement. However, Mandavya was a sage of immense yogic power. Because of his austerities, his tapas, the spike did not kill him.
Good grief.
He remained alive on the stake, suspended between life and death, suffering unimaginable agonizing pain. So when Kaushika accidentally bumps into him in the dark, violently jostling the spike, Mandavya finally snaps.
He is furious, and understandably so. In his agony, he curses Kaushika with a terrible absolute pronouncement, "You will drop dead before the next sunrise."
A death sentence.
Exactly. Now, we have to understand the weight of a sage's curse. It is not an empty threat. It is a newly written cosmic law. The moment those words leave his mouth, Kaushika is doomed.
But here is where the spiritual physics we've been discussing create a catastrophic short circuit.
Okay, how so?
Well, Mandavya has immense power from his yogic austerities. But Sumati has immense power from her flawless, unwavering devotion. Hearing this curse directed at her husband, Sumati issues a countercommand. Using the sheer force of her accumulated tapas, she commands the sun deity, Surya, not to rise.
It just says no.
Basically, she essentially dictates, if the sun rises the trigger for my husband's death, then the sun shall never rise again.
Let the sun never rise. Just think about the sheer audacity of a mortal woman looking at the cosmos and hitting the pause button on a celestial body. And the crazy thing is, her power is so absolute that the sun actually obeys her.
It halts.
It halts below the horizon. And immediately, the entire universe is plunged into absolute chaotic deadlock.
The consequences are immediate and catastrophic on a universal scale. Without the sun, time effectively stops. The cycle of day and night ceases. There is no sunlight, so the crops immediately begin to fail, threatening mass starvation. But more importantly for the cosmic order, the Vedic rituals, which depend entirely on the precise timing of dawn and dusk, are completely disrupted.
Which means the gods are cut off.
Right. Because the rituals stop, the gods in heaven are starving, as they are not receiving their required oblations. The intricate machinery of the universe is grinding to a devastating halt.
Okay, I have to step in here and wrestle with the morality of this because it
Yeah.
feels deeply unjust. Is it fair that the entire universe, every plant, animal, human, and God, has to suffer and potentially die because one terrible guy tripped over a sage in the dark?
It's a huge ethical dilemma.
Sumati is protecting a deeply flawed, unfaithful man at the expense of all life in existence. It's forcing a massive standoff between an individual's right to devotion and the necessity of cosmic order.
It is a brilliant ethical tension, and it is entirely intentional. The texts are demonstrating a terrifying concept. Tapas, this spiritual power, is fundamentally neutral. It is exactly like electricity.
Electricity doesn't care who uses it.
Exactly. Electricity does not judge whether the person flipping the switch is using it to power a hospital ventilator or an electric chair. Sumati has earned this immense power through her flawless actions, and she's using it to protect what is hers, completely, regardless of her husband's moral failings. Her devotion supersedes his flaws. But as you rightly point out, the collateral damage to the universe is entirely unacceptable. The system is broken.
So the universe is trapped in this eternal, freezing night. The guides are panicking. They run to Brahma, the creator, begging for a system override. And Brahma says, I can't do it. I cannot override the concentrated power of a perfectly chaste woman. The only thing that can break the command of a devoted woman is the power of an equally or even more devoted woman.
And we know who that is.
Yep. So he points them to Sati Anasuya.
Anasuya essentially becomes the ultimate cosmic negotiator. She's the specialist brought in when the highest gods and the laws of physics are completely powerless to resolve the deadlock. The gods approach her in the Chitrakuta forest and beg for her intervention.
It's like calling in an elite hostage negotiator to defuse a bomb.
That's a very accurate comparison.
Anasuya travels to meet Sumati. And what I find so compelling is that there is no battle of magic here. There are no lightning bolts thrown, no threats made. It is just a quiet, profound conversation between two mortal women who deeply understand the crushing weight of devotion.
Right. Anasuya counsels Sumati. She explains the peril the entire universe is facing. She validates Sumati's devotion, acknowledging her power, but gently points out that the preservation of Dharma of the broader cosmic order must eventually take precedence over individual attachment. But crucially, Anasuya doesn't just ask Sumati to sacrifice her husband for the greater good. Anasuya uses her own vast, unyielding reservoir of tapas to make a guarantee.
Right. She brokers a win-win. She guarantees that if Sumati drops her command and allows the sun to rise, triggering the curse, Anasuya will use her own power to immediately resurrect Kaushika.
It's brilliant.
And not only will he live, but Anasuya guarantees he will be completely cured of his leprosy and his terrible habits. It's a masterclass in negotiation. Sumati, trusting Anasuya's immense purity, relents. She tells the sun to rise, morning finally breaks, the curse hits, but Anasuya immediately restores Kaushika, healed and whole. The universe breathes a massive sigh of relief.
It's a perfect resolution.
Yeah.
And we should note, for the sake of covering all our sources, that there is an alternative, more aggressive Puranic legend regarding the halting of the sun.
Oh, right, the eclipse version.
Yes, in that version, it is the demonic eclipse entity, Rahu, who violently swallows the sun, cloaking the world in darkness. In that specific legend, it is Sage Atri who uses his immense powers to physically wrest the sun out of Rahu's grasp, violently restoring light to the world.
So whether it is Anasuya talking down a grieving wife with radical empathy, or Atri wrestling a cosmic demon for the sun, the conclusion is the same. This couple is single-handedly keeping the solar system functioning.
They really are the anchors.
Because of these immense world-saving feats, Atri and Anasuya became the absolute go-to elders. They were the ultimate authorities for anyone seeking guidance on how to live, which leads us perfectly into their encounter with the most famous royal couple in Hindu epics. Let's move into the Ramayana and their counseling of Sita and Rama.
We are moving now from the abstract cosmic scale of stopping the sun to a deeply personal human narrative within the Ramayana epic. The context is vital here. Prince Rama, his wife Sita, and his brother Lakshmana have been exiles from their kingdom of Ayodhya for 14 years. They are wandering through the wilderness. And during this exile, they make a specific, intentional detour to visit the hermitage of Atri and Anasuya in the Chitrakuta forest.
Let's talk about the physical setting of this hermitage, because the visual contrast is startling. The Ramayana describes this place as an absolute pristine paradise. It's a serene lake filled with divine, unearthly music. There are cranes, pink geese, floating tortoises, swans, and frogs. It is lush, vibrant, and perfectly balanced.
The setting is not just pretty scenery. It is a direct physical manifestation of Anasuya's spiritual power. Valmiki, the author of the Ramayana, explicitly notes that there was once a severe, devastating 10-year famine in the Chitrakuta region.
Nothing grew.
Nothing. The land was cracked, animals were dying en masse. It was Anasuya who stepped in, performed intensive austerities, and literally brought the river Mandakini down to earth, breaking the famine and making the dead trees bear fruit again. You have to contrast this lush sanctuary with the environment just outside its borders.
Oh, the Dandaka forest?
Yes. Just beyond this ashram begins the Dandaka forest, which the epic describes as harsh, terrifying, and deeply infected by violent rakshasas or demons like Kara and Varada. And Anasuya's hermitage is a literal, hard-won oasis of peace in a terrifying wilderness.
So Rama, Sita, and Lakshmana arrive at this beautiful oasis, exhausted from their travels, and they are welcomed with immense honor. And here is a behavioral detail in the text that I absolutely love because it subverts so many expectations.
It really does.
Sage Atri, the mind-born son of Brahma, meets Rama, who is this famous, powerful prince and warrior. And what does Atri do? He immediately starts bragging about his wife. He spends his time telling Rama all about how Anasuya ended the famine and brought down the river.
Taking a step back here to look at the sociology of the era, it tells us an enormous amount about the gender dynamics within these specific, highly elevated aesthetic circles.
It's so different from the norm.
Right. In a broader societal context that was heavily, undeniably patriarchal, you see Sage Atri actively and enthusiastically boasting about his wife's superior power to a visiting royal male. He is not threatened by her greatness in the slightest. He is her primary champion. They operate as absolute, undisputed equals.
That mutual respect is so clear and so refreshing to read. So while Atri and Rama are talking, Anasuya takes Princess Sita aside. And Anasuya decides to impart some wisdom, teaching Sita what the texts call Stradharmarahasya. Let's break that term down. What is she teaching her?
Stradharmarahasya translates to the secrets of the Dharma, or the fundamental duties of women. It is a profound, concentrated instruction on how to conduct oneself as a wife, particularly regarding loyalty, resilience, and service to one's husband and extended family. And Anasuya essentially tells Sita that absolute, unwavering service to one's husband is the greatest tapas ordained for a woman.
Now, I have to jump in because to a modern ear in the 21st century, the phrase absolute service to one's husband can sound very subjugating. It sounds like a demand for blind subservience.
It definitely can.
But the context of Sita's reply to Anasuya is crucial to understanding the intellectual depth of this exchange. Sita agrees with Anasuya, but she expands brilliantly on her reasoning. She says she would obey her husband even if he were poor or stripped of his fortune, which of course Rama currently is, but she emphasizes why she is devoted to him.
Yes, Sita's definition of duty is not a passive, blind obedience to a patriarchal structure. It is actively rooted in a deep, conscious respect for Rama's specific moral character. She specifically points out to Anasuya that Rama treats all of his father, Dasaratha's other wives, exactly as he treats his own biological mother, Kausaya. He is a man of profound equity, fairness, and religious virtue. Her devotion is a calculated, intellectual response to his nobility, not just a societal obligation forced upon her.
She chooses to revere him because he has proven himself worthy of reverence. Sita even cites her own historical role models during this conversation. She mentions Savitri, who famously outwitted the god of death to rescue her husband, and Rohini, the star who is never seen in the night sky without the moon.
It's a very intellectual conversation.
It's a beautiful, high-level exchange between two generations of incredibly powerful women. They are defining the ethics of their time. And before Rama and Sita leave the ashram, Anasuya gives Sita some incredible parting gifts.
She gives Sita a heavenly robe that never fades, never tears, and never gets dirty. She gives her a sacred garland, a highly fragrant unguent that will maintain her physical beauty and vitality indefinitely, and a sublime protective gem. These are not just pretty royal trinkets.
Exactly. They are practical, magical protections. Anasuya knows Sita is about to walk out of this oasis and face the absolute horrors of a demon-infested forest for the next decade. She is outfitting her with spiritual and physical armor for the brutal road ahead.
Very practical.
Very. So while Anasuya was giving practical interpersonal counsel on marriage, resilience, and duty, Atri was busy writing the literal rule book on human biology, ethics, and social behavior. Which brings us to his work in the practical sciences. Let's discuss the Atri Samhita, Ayurveda, and the concept of cosmic empathy.
Sage Atri's intellectual contributions extend far beyond the poetic cosmology of the Rig Veda. He was a foundational, pioneering figure in the practical sciences, specifically medical astrology and Ayurveda, the ancient Indian system of medicine.
Which is still huge today.
Absolutely. He is credited in various texts with creating numerous specific Ayurvedic formulations, and his foundational principles regarding the balance of the body are still referenced in traditional medical texts today.
The concept of medical astrology is fascinating to me. It's the idea that the macrocosm, the movement of the planets and stars, directly and physically influences the microcosm, the humors and health of the human body. He was trying to map the sky onto human anatomy, but apparently all this deep, abstract thinking almost got him killed on one occasion.
Yes, there is a prominent, somewhat harrowing legend involving the Ashwini Kumars, who are the twin physicians of the gods. Atri was sitting in the forest, deep in a meditative trance. He was so far removed from his physical body, exploring these cosmic concepts, that he was completely unaware of his immediate surroundings. A group of demons spotted him in this entirely vulnerable state and launched a coordinated physical attack.
It was literally caught slipping in the astral plane. His physical body was completely defenseless.
Exactly, but the Ashwini Kumars, riding by, happened to witness the ambush. They intervened, physically fought off the demons, and saved the sage's life.
Talk about right place, right time.
Definitely. In gratitude for his life, and perhaps as a peer-to-peer exchange of high-level knowledge, the texts say the divine twins taught Atri specifically about the complex medical aspects of puberty and human development, deepening his already vast Ayurvedic knowledge.
I love the image of the gods of medicine just dropping peer-reviewed medical journals on a sage right after a demon fight. But Atri didn't just study the biological mechanics of the body, he studied how people should behave to maintain health in a societal and psychological sense. He codified his findings in a massive text called the Atri Samhita.
The Atri Samhita is a crucial text for understanding ancient ethics. It is particularly followed by the Vaikhanasas, which is a specific sub-tradition within Vaishnavism prominent in South India today. This text lays out the rules of daily conduct, ethics, and what it means to live a balanced life. And it anchors its philosophy heavily on three core precepts: Dhamma, Dana, and Daya.
Let's unpack these 3Ds because as I was reading through the source material, they struck me as incredibly, almost shockingly modern.
They are very applicable today.
They read less like archaic religious dogma and much more like a modern mental health manual or like a foundational book on Stoic philosophy. Let's start with the first one, Dhamma.
Dhamma generally translates to self-restraint, but the Atri Samhita gives it a very specific, highly challenging psychological definition. It states that if material or spiritual pain is inflicted upon you by others, and you are not offended by it, and crucially, you do not seek revenge, that state of being is Dhamma.
Not seeking revenge even when you are actively hurt. That requires an advanced level of emotional intelligence. It's essentially saying, I will not let your toxic behavior dictate my internal emotional state.
That's a perfect summary.
It's a strategy for aggressively protecting your own peace. That makes perfect sense for emotional stability. But the next precept, Dana, which means charity, feels a little out of place in a mental health context. How does giving away your resources help you achieve this cosmic harmony?
The text is very specific about the mechanism of Dana. It specifies that even if you have a highly limited income, even if you are poor, you should give something away daily, with care and a liberal spirit. It is the psychological habit of generosity, not the monetary amount, that matters. The function of Dana is to prevent the hoarding mentality. Hoarding breeds a constant low-level anxiety about losing what you have.
I see. So even when you're broke, if you give a little away, it forcefully shifts your brain from a mindset of scarcity and fear to a mindset of abundance. You are proving to yourself that you have enough to share. That is incredibly practical.
It really is.
And finally, we get to the heaviest hitter of them all, Daya.
Daya translates to compassion. The Atri Samhita defines it as behaving towards others exactly as you would behave towards your own self.
Sounds like the golden rule.
It is, but it goes further. It doesn't just mean being nice to your friends and family. The text explicitly, demandingly states that you must treat your friends, those who actively envy you, and even your absolute sworn enemies exactly like your own self.
Treat your enemy exactly like your own self. I have to wrestle with the feasibility of that. The sheer psychological weight of that command is staggering. Loving an enemy as oneself is a radical, almost impossible concept of universal empathy.
It's not easy.
It completely transcends our standard evolutionary social rules of tribalism, where you protect your in-group and destroy your out-group. If you actually manage to practice Daya, you become psychologically untouchable. Nobody can make you hate them, but is it actually possible for a normal human to do that?
It is the ultimate goal, not necessarily the starting line. It bridges the mystical and the practical beautifully. Atri is saying that cosmic harmony, the grand stuff he writes about in the Rig Veda with the stars and gods, actually begins with how you treat the person who hates you the most in your daily life. It is an ethics of radical, uncompromising interconnectedness. You cannot be connected to the cosmos if you are disconnected from your enemy.
That is a staggering philosophical leap. And Atri's guidelines on how to live well individually eventually evolved, scaling up into a massive, decentralized societal framework that organized entire populations.
A huge leap from personal ethics to social structure.
Yeah, it's a system that is still incredibly prevalent and, as we will see, highly legally controversial in India today. How did we get from personal stoicism to the Gotra system? Let's examine the ancient lineage and modern law.
To understand the Gotra system, we really have to define the term first. The word Gotra is foundational to Hindu social structure. Literally translated from its ancient Sanskrit roots, it means forward-moving descendants. Or, if you look at it in a more pastoral, agricultural sense, it means a herd within an enclosure.
Okay.
Broadly speaking, it signifies an unbroken, continuous male line of descent from a common male ancestor.
And those common male ancestors are none other than our Saptarishi, the 7 great sages we talked about at the beginning.
That's right.
So you have entire populations tracing their specific lineages back thousands of years to Atri, to Kashyapa, Vasistha, Vishvamitra, Gautama, Jamadagni, and Viragraja, plus an 8th sage, Jambu or Agastya, depending on the specific text you read.
These foundational sages are known as the Gotrakarins, the originators. Over millennia, as populations grew and migrated, these primary 8 lineages branched out into roughly 108 main Gotras, and then subdivided further. But the fundamental overriding rule of the Gotra system, the mechanism that makes it function sociologically, is that it forms an exogamous unit.
Exogamous, meaning by definition you have to marry outside of your group.
Correct. The system strictly dictates that marriage within the same Gotra, which is known as a Sagotra marriage, is strictly prohibited. 2 people within the same Gotra, even if they have never met, even if they live on opposite sides of the subcontinent and their families haven't interacted in 1,000 years, are legally and culturally considered siblings by virtue of sharing that ancient, unbroken patrilineal descent.
Wow.
To marry within your own Gotra is traditionally considered incestuous.
What this actually means for the average person in the ancient world is brilliant. When you look at it from a biological perspective, this system is a masterpiece of early social engineering. Long before anyone knew what a chromosome was, long before the concept of DNA testing, ancient societies needed a reliable mechanism to prevent genetic inbreeding. The Gotra system acted as a decentralized genetic tracking app built entirely on oral tradition and naming conventions.
It is a remarkable, highly effective piece of preventative medicine operating at a societal level. And it wasn't solely about preventing genetic bottlenecks, it was also deeply political. By legally forcing people to marry outside their immediate clan, you forge alliances. You force the sharing of resources, trade, and culture across different regions and communities. It prevents isolated tribalism.
Our sources also point out something fascinating about the names of the Gotras themselves, which grounds the system in the natural world. An ethnologist named Robert Fane Russell noted that many Gotras have totemic origins.
Yes, this is a fascinating layer. While the primary lineages trace back to the celestial sages, the specific names of the subdivisions often connect deeply to nature. For example, the name of the Haradvaja Gotra relates to a specific lark bird. The Kaushika Gotra relates to Kusha grass. Kashyapa connects to a tortoise.
That's beautiful.
It indicates that embedded within these highly structured human lineages is a profound animistic reverence for the natural world, plants, and animals. The clan historically identifies with, and perhaps protects, the traits of that specific natural totem.
Now, we should note that while the patrilineal Gotra system passing from father to son is overwhelmingly dominant, it is not absolute across the entire culture. There are fascinating regional exceptions. For instance, the Tulu people in South India operate on a system where the Gotra is passed down from the mother to the child, which is a matrilineal system.
And these variations lead to very different, highly specific marriage customs. In many South Indian Hindu societies, there is a strong tradition of cross-cousin marriage. For example, it might be perfectly acceptable for a man to marry his maternal uncle's daughter.
Which sounds like a contradiction.
Right. To an outside observer, marrying a first cousin might seem to violate the rule against inbreeding. But under the strict internal logic of the Gotra system, because the Gotra passes exclusively through the male line, a mother's brother's daughter ultimately belongs to a different Gotra than the man. Therefore, she is technically exogamous and eligible for marriage.
Okay, I see.
Conversely, a paternal uncle's daughter shares the exact same male line Gotra, making her a parallel cousin, a sister, and strictly off-limits.
It's a very precise, internally logical system, but as with any ancient, rigid system operating in the fluid reality of the 21st century, there is immense friction. And we see this friction playing out violently and legally in modern courts of law. How does a modern secular state handle ancient clan laws?
This is where we find a complex, ongoing intersection of ancient tradition and modern secular jurisprudence. In India today, the governing legal framework for these matters is the Hindu Marriage Act of 1955.
Okay, 1955.
Now, Section 5V of this specific act legally prohibits what are called Fapindo relationships, meaning you cannot legally marry close blood relatives up to a certain number of recent generations. However, the act does not restrict Sagotra marriages. Legally speaking, marrying someone of the exact same Gotra is perfectly valid under modern state law, provided you are not closely related by recent bloodlines.
But just because something is legal on a piece of stamp paper doesn't mean it's socially accepted in reality. We need to impartially report on the severe conflict happening on the ground here. In places like the state of Haryana, traditional unelected community councils known as Khat panchayats are deeply, sometimes violently opposed to Sagotra marriages.
They are very strictly against it.
They believe the ancient tradition of Atri and the sages must be upheld at all costs, and they have actively campaigned to legally ban marriages within the same Gotra, arguing that the modern law violates deep-seated cultural norms.
That is correct. Looking at this purely objectively, the traditional councils view the Secular Hindu Marriage Act as an aggressive infringement on customary religious law. They believe the state is sanctioning incest, they have organized protests, and even formally petitioned the Delhi High Court to seek an amendment to the National Act to explicitly prohibit Sagotra marriages.
And how did the modern judiciary respond to the weight of thousands of years of tradition?
The courts have consistently and firmly sided with the secular scientific law. In the case of the specific Khat Panchayat petition, the Delhi High Court decisively dismissed it. They even went so far as to warn that the petitioners would face financial penalty costs for wasting the court's time in the future.
Wow, they did not hold back.
No, but the judiciary's foundational stance on this was actually articulated much earlier in a landmark 1945 Bombay High Court case, Mazavra versus Raghavendra.
What was the specific argument in that 1945 case?
In that case, which involved a Brahmin couple of the same Gotra wishing to marry, the court systematically dismantled the legal enforceability of the traditional Gotra definition. The judge explicitly stated that the idea of millions of modern families genuinely descending from an unbroken, verifiable line of 8 specific sages from impossible to accept.
It's impossible to accept.
Right. The court stressed that Hindu society and its legal frameworks needed to keep up with changing times and empirical scientific understandings of genetics, rather than relying on ancient, unprovable, poetic genealogies.
It is a fascinating high-stakes clash. On one side, you have a thousands of years old tradition that successfully provided social stability and prevented inbreeding for millennia. On the other side, you have modern jurisprudence requiring empirical proof of actual genetic relation rather than relying on a mythological lineage. We aren't endorsing either side here, but it's absolutely vital to understand how the legacy of Atri and his fellow sages isn't just history, it is literally being debated and litigated in high courts today.
It proves that these figures aren't just characters in dusty books. Their ancient systems still heavily govern the fundamental social contracts and life choices of millions of people.
Absolutely. And the legacy of Atri and Anasuya isn't just a dry legal or sociological debate either. It is deeply embedded in vibrant, sensory, living worship happening right now. How do people interact with these figures today? Let's explore the living temples and the festival of Dattatreya.
If you want to see this legacy alive, you can travel to Chitrakoot today in the state of Madhya Pradesh and actually visit the Sage Anasuya ashrama. It is located about 16 kilometers from the main town, set further upstream on the banks of the Mandakini River.
The same river.
And remember, yes, this is the very river Anasuya is said to have miraculously brought down to earth during the 10-year famine we discussed earlier.
The descriptions of this physical place today are just magical. It sounds like a piece of the Ramayana preserved in amber. Even today, despite modern development, it remains incredibly peaceful. It's set amidst thick, quiet forests, The melody of birdsong plays continuously throughout the day.
It's very secluded.
It's geographically located where the various small streams of the surrounding hills converge into the river. Visiting it offers a direct, visceral connection to the serenity that Anasuya supposedly created out of a wasteland. At the center of it all is a temple featuring idols of Atri, Anasuya, and their incredibly unique son, Dattatreya.
The ashram serves as a major active center of pilgrimage. Throughout the calendar year, they host massive festivals that draw people from across the country. During Navaratri, which is the peak spring pilgrimage season, special Devi pujas, intense ritual adorations are performed daily.
Wow.
These rituals specifically honor Anasuya not just as a good wife, but as the ultimate supreme embodiment of fierce feminine devotion and power.
There is also a massive annual fair held there in the Chaitra month.
What I find charming about it is that it's described as having a distinctly rural, traditional, almost pastoral character. It's not one of those highly commercialized, neon-lit city festivals. It's local traders, farmers, and pilgrims from the surrounding rural districts coming together in the forest to celebrate.
It's very authentic. And then there is the observance of Shivaratri at the ashram.
Yes, Shivaratri at the Sage Atri ashram is a highly unique experience. Because it is set deep in the quiet forest, away from the noise of the city, devotees spend the entire night engaged in severe austerities that mirror the couple's history.
They really commit to it.
They do. They fast completely, they keep a strict vigil to avoid sleep, and they perform abhishekam, the continuous, rhythmic ritual bathing of the Shiva lingam with water and milk. The dark forest setting provides a profound, contemplative, almost heavy atmosphere that you simply cannot replicate in a crowded, brightly lit city temple.
But the absolute biggest celebration connected to their lineage, the one that goes nationwide, has to be Datta Jayanti.
Undoubtedly. Datta Jayanti is the massive festival that specifically celebrates the birth of their son, Dattatreya, the conjoined avatar of the Trimurti. It is celebrated on the full moon day of the Margashirsha month in the Hindu calendar, which usually falls in late December or January. It is celebrated on a massive scale across India, particularly heavily in the states of Maharashtra, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, and Gujarat.
Let's paint a picture of the mechanism of this festival. What does Datta Jayanti actually look and feel like for a devotee on the ground? It is an intensely sensory experience. You wake up incredibly early in the morning, long before the sun rises, to take a freezing, purifying dip in a holy river or stream.
Very bracing.
Why a freezing dip? It is a physical shock to the system designed to momentarily simulate the harsh tapas, the bodily austerities that Atri and Anasuya practiced in the forest. You are physically shocking yourself awake to the spiritual reality. You're fasting. The air around the temples is thick with the sharp smell of camphor and burning incense from the continuous pujas.
The auditory environment is just as overwhelming. You hear the constant rhythmic overlapping chanting of bhajans, devotional songs, echoing continuously through the temple courtyards. And crucially, devotees spend a significant portion of the day engaged in intense intellectual study, reading sacred texts. They read the Avahuta Gita and the Jivan Mukta Gita.
What exactly is in the Avahuta Gita? We shouldn't just list the book without knowing what the devotees are actually absorbing from it.
The Avahuta Gita is a text of extreme non-dualism attributed to Dattatreya himself. It essentially preaches that there is absolutely no difference between the individual soul and the supreme cosmic reality.
So it's breaking down all the barriers.
It is a text that completely shatters boundaries. When devotees read it, they are absorbing the philosophical culmination of Atri's abstract wisdom and Anasuya's grounded power. They also read the Guru Charita, which is a deeply revered text, detailing the lives of later historical saints who are considered by believers to be direct incarnations of Dattatreya.
So places like Ganagapur, Narsimhawadi, and Maniknagar become absolute hives of focused devotion. It is hundreds of thousands of people from all walks of life, all connected by the shared ancient story of a sage and a devoted woman sitting in a forest, and the impossible three-headed child they brought into the world.
It reflects exactly why these specific geographic locations in these demanding festivals endure century after century. They offer believers a tangible bridge. By chanting the complex texts, enduring the freezing rivers, and visiting the quiet forests, they step out of the profane, stressful, everyday modern world, and they momentarily step into the sacred, timeless reality of Atri and Anasuya.
Man, so we have covered an absolutely incredible amount of ground today. We have traced Sage Atri and Sage Anasuya from their origins in the abstract conceptual mind of Brahma straight through the complex grammatical riddles of the Rig Veda.
We really have.
We have watched them use their accumulated spiritual heat to outsmart the very creators of the universe and literally stop the sun in the sky. We've seen them provide tactical and moral counsel to epic royalty in the Ramayana, and we've followed the immense weight of their legacy all the way to the legal debates of modern high courts and the vibrant, incense-filled festivals happening today.
It is a journey that spans the entirety of human thought in this tradition, from the highest abstract cosmology to deeply practical everyday sociology.
Exactly. And to you, our listener, we want to leave you with the synthesis. Beneath all the grand cosmic myths we've discussed, beneath the wild stories of halting the sun and turning supreme gods into crying babies, lies a deeply profound, incredibly relevant set of lessons for your own life. It is about the immense, silent power of absolute contentment, of striving to be Anasuya, completely free from the toxic, leaking drain of envy.
So true.
It is about the relentless, active pursuit of complex knowledge, as seen in Atri's intricate linguistic riddles, and perhaps most importantly, it is about that radical stoic empathy we found codified in the Atri Samhita, the near impossible command to treat your bitterest enemy exactly as you would treat yourself.
Those are the true, enduring superpowers hidden within these ancient texts. But I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to ponder, building on the mechanics of everything we've discussed today. We talked at length about how Anasuya used the water from washing Atri's feet, the Parathiyatham, to disarm and defeat the most powerful gods in the universe. It was an act of extreme, grounded humility that transmuted into absolute, unbeatable power.
Right.
It forces us to ask a very difficult question of ourselves. In our modern, hyper-individualistic lives, where we are constantly told by every screen we look at to assert our egos, to loudly demand our space, and to project our power outward, what everyday, quiet acts of humility and service were we completely overlooking? Acts that might actually hold the key to our own greatest silent strength.
That is a brilliant, unsettling question to end on, because, as we established at the very beginning of this deep dive, the most immense, reality-altering power in the universe isn't a loud rocket launch. It is silent, it is invisible, it is the quiet strength of a mind perfectly free of envy and a heart entirely willing to serve. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep asking difficult questions, keep looking beyond the surface, and keep exploring the incredible wisdom hidden in these ancient stories.